Okay, so picture this. You pull up to the auto parts store, and you see that massive wall of motor oil. And your high-mileage car is basically saying, hey, don't get this wrong. You've heard all about synthetic oil being the way to go, but is it actually safe for an older engine? That's what we're diving into today.
You know what's funny? There's actually a ton of outdated advice out there about using synthetic with older cars. So let's break it down and figure out what's true and what's not.
Perfect. To start, can we just back up for a second and talk about what synthetic oil even is? We all know it's not like olive oil or anything, but what actually makes it different from the regular stuff?
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely more high tech than that. Think of conventional oil like a bag of mixed nuts, different sizes, shapes, maybe some shells in there. But
Mhm.
synthetic is more like those perfectly round chocolate candies, all the same made in the lab, basically. So fewer impurities and a much smoother flow.
Okay, so it's all about consistency and being pure. But how does that actually affect my engine?
Well, that smooth flow means you get way better lubrication, which is super important for any engine, but especially one with a lot of miles. It's like the difference between ice skating and trying to walk in old boots. Less friction means less wear and tear on all those moving parts.
Makes sense. So less friction, less wear, anything else.
Oh yeah, there's more. Synthetic oil is really good at getting rid of all that gunk that builds up over time, that sludge and all the deposits. It's got these special detergents that basically break down and remove that stuff. So your engine stays cleaner and runs smoother.
So it's like a spa day for my engine, I'm sold.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And here's another bonus. Synthetic oil keeps its viscosity, which is like how thick it is no matter the temperature. So whether it's freezing cold or super hot outside, your engine is protected.
Okay, this has all sounded pretty good.
Yeah.
But here's where I get a little nervous. Is there anything bad that could happen? Can switching to synthetic in a high-mileage car actually cause problems?
It's a good question, and there are a few things to watch out for. The biggest one is oil leaks. Because synthetic is such a good cleaner, sometimes it can loosen up sludge that was actually plugging up tiny leaks.
So it's like it's doing its job too well, cleaning out stuff that was actually holding things together.
Exactly. But the good news is that high-mileage synthetic oils are made for this. They have additives called seal conditioners that help to refresh and maintain those old seals, so you're less likely to get leaks.
That makes me feel better. It's like giving those old seals a little love and care.
Yeah.
What else should we be thinking about?
Another thing is the overall condition of your engine.
Yeah.
Like if it's got a ton of sludge buildup, switching to synthetic all at once could cause problems. It could dislodge big chunks and clog things up.
So it's kind of like a shock to the system.
Yeah, exactly. In those cases, it's better to switch over slowly. You could start with a synthetic blend, which is a mix of synthetic and conventional,
Right.
or talk to your mechanic about doing an engine flush before going full synthetic.
Good advice. Sounds like knowing your engine's history is really important. But let's switch gears a bit and talk about the benefits in the long run. Is it actually worth making the switch to synthetic for an older car?
This is where it gets interesting. If you're planning on keeping your car for a while, there are some really good reasons to switch. One of the biggest is better fuel economy.
Wait, really? How does oil affect how many miles I get per gallon?
Remember all that friction we talked about? Well, less friction means your engine doesn't have to work as hard, and that means you use less gas. It's like riding a bike with a rusty chain versus one that's oiled up. You'll use way more energy with the rusty chain.
I get it. So synthetic is like that well-oiled chain, letting the engine run smoother and using less gas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that better efficiency means you save money at the pump. It might not seem like a lot, but those little savings add up over time, especially if you drive a lot.
Every little bit helps these days. So less friction, better gas mileage. What other good things can we expect from synthetic oil?
Well, remember how we talked about it keeping its viscosity no matter the temperature? That's really important too. Synthetic oil doesn't get all thick and sluggish when it's cold, so your engine is protected even during those cold starts when conventional oil can struggle.
Yeah, I hate that sluggish feeling on cold mornings.
And on the other side, when it's really hot out, synthetic oil won't thin out too much. So it keeps lubricating your engine even when you're driving hard or it's super hot outside.
It's like an all-weather oil that can handle anything.
Exactly. It gives you consistent protection and your engine performs better no matter the temperature. And when you add in the fact that you don't have to change it as often, it's easy to see why so many people are making the switch.
It's like a whole bunch of benefits all in one package.
Yeah.
But I know some people are still hesitant, especially if they've been using regular oil for years and haven't had problems.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to those people who are on the fence about making the change?
I get it. It's hard to change what you're used to. But I think it's important to think about the long-term health of your engine. Switching to synthetic is like preventative care. It might not seem necessary right now, but it can save you from expensive repairs later on.
That's a good way to think about it. It's about
Yeah.
being proactive and protecting your investment.
Exactly. And you don't have to change everything overnight. Remember, we talked about starting with a synthetic blend to ease your engine into it.
Right. That's a good option for people who want to try it out before going all in with synthetic.
It's definitely a gentler approach, especially for older engines that might need a little time to adjust.
Yeah, this is super helpful.
Yeah.
But I have another question. Are there ever times when synthetic oil might not be the best choice? Are there engines that wouldn't benefit from it?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Actually, there are a few situations where synthetic might not be the best. For example, some really old engines, especially those with specific designs, might not work well with the detergents in synthetic oil.
Oh, interesting. So it's not like a magic solution for every engine out there.
Not really. In those rare cases, it's always best to talk to a mechanic who knows about older cars. They can look at your engine and tell you what type of oil is best.
That makes sense. It's always better to get expert advice when you're dealing with unique or vintage engines.
Definitely. And it shows how important it is to know your car's history and what it needs. What works for one engine might not work for another.
So there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It's about finding the right oil for each car.
Exactly. And that's where a good mechanic can really help. They can guide you through all the different types of oil and make sure you're choosing the best one for your car's health.
Great advice. Okay, before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, I have one more question. We've been talking a lot about older cars, but what about new cars? Do the same rules apply for synthetic oil?
That's a great question, and it deserves its own conversation. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive into the world of synthetic oil and brand new cars. You know, it's amazing how much of car maintenance is actually chemistry. We always think about the mechanics, but understanding the science behind oil can really help us take care of our cars.
Yeah, it's true. We think of oil as just oil, but there's a whole lot going on at a molecular level, right?
Exactly. And those differences between conventional and synthetic, they make a real difference for your engine, especially as it gets older. We talked about fuel economy earlier, but I think it's worth looking at that a little closer.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone's thinking about gas prices these days.
Mhm.
So how does synthetic oil actually help you save money at the pump?
It all comes down to friction. The conventional oil with its messy molecular structure, it creates more friction between the moving parts. So your engine has to work harder and that burns more fuel. It's like if you're riding a bike with a rusty chain, you have to use so much more energy compared to a chain that's well oiled.
I like that analogy. So synthetic oil is like the well-oiled chain.
Okay.
It helps the engine run smoother and use less gas.
Exactly. And that smoother running means better fuel economy. It might not seem like a huge difference at first, but those little bits add up, especially if you drive a lot.
Makes sense. So less friction, better gas mileage. What other performance boosts can we get from synthetic?
Well, remember we talked about how synthetic oil handles temperature changes. That's another big one. It maintains its viscosity, which is how thick or thin it is, no matter how hot or cold it gets. So it can protect your engine during cold starts when regular oil is thick and sluggish.
Ugh, yeah, those cool starts can be rough.
And on the other end, when it's hot out, synthetic oil won't get too thin, so it keeps doing its job even when you're pushing your car hard or driving in hot weather.
So it's like having an all-weather oil. It's always ready.
Exactly. Consistent protection and performance, whether it's hot or cold. And don't forget, you don't have to change it as often. So yeah, a lot of people are switching over.
It's like a win-win-win situation. But I know some people are still a little unsure, especially if they've been using regular oil forever and haven't had issues. What would you say to them?
I understand that it's hard to change what you're used to. But think about it this way. Switching to synthetic is like investing in preventative care for your car. It might not seem necessary now, but it can save you a lot of money on repairs down the line.
That's a good point. Taking care of your car now can save you headaches later.
Exactly. And remember, you can always start slow with a synthetic blend to give your engine a chance to adjust.
Right. That's a good option for people who want to try it out before fully committing.
It's a much gentler approach, especially for older engines that might need some time to get used to it.
This is all really great info. But I'm wondering, are there any times when synthetic oil is not the best choice? Are there engines that wouldn't benefit from it?
Good question. While synthetic oil has a lot of advantages, there are a few cases where it might not be the best option. For example, some really old engines, especially those with very specific designs, might not be compatible with the detergents in synthetic oil.
Oh, interesting. So it's not a perfect solution for every engine.
Not quite. In those rare cases, it's best to be safe and talk to a mechanic who specializes in older cars. They can take a look and tell you what kind of oil is best for your engine.
That makes sense. When you're dealing with classic cars, it's always good to have an expert on your side.
Absolutely. And it just goes to show how important it is to know your car's history and what it needs. What works for one engine might not work for another.
So it's all about finding the right oil for each individual car.
Exactly. And that's where a good mechanic can really make a difference. They can help you navigate all the different options and choose the oil that will keep your car running its best.
Great advice. Now, before we wrap up this part, I have one more question. We've been talking about older cars, but what about brand new cars?
Hmm.
Do those same rules apply for synthetic oil?
That's a great question and one that we should definitely discuss. Let's take a moment, and when we come back, we'll dive into the world of synthetic oil and new cars.
Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle this new car question.
Okay.
So is synthetic the way to go right away? Or should you stick with regular oil for those first few thousand miles?
It's a question we get a lot, and the answer has actually changed over the years. It used to be that everyone said to break in a new engine with regular oil first. The idea was that synthetic was too slippery, and it might prevent the piston rings from seating properly.
Oh, so the engine needed a little tough love at first.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Engine technology has come a long way, and a lot of new cars these days are actually designed to use synthetic right from the factory. In fact, some car companies will even void your warranty if you don't use synthetic.
Wow, that's pretty serious. So it sounds like things have changed a lot and synthetic is becoming the standard, even for new cars.
Absolutely. But as always, the best thing to do is check your owner's manual. It'll tell you exactly what kind of oil is recommended for your car and how often to change it.
That's a good reminder. We don't always think about that little book, but it's full of important info.
It really is. And even if your car doesn't say you have to use synthetic, it's still worth considering. All those benefits we talked about, the extra protection, the better gas mileage, the longer oil change intervals, those all apply to new engines too.
So even if it's not required, synthetic could still give my new car a boost right away.
Exactly. It can help keep your engine cleaner, running smoother, and you might even see a little improvement in your gas mileage from the start.
Okay, so the takeaway here is to check your owner's manual, but don't be afraid of synthetic even in a new car.
Exactly. When it comes down to it, choosing the right oil for your car, whether it's new or old, is an investment in its future. You're helping it to stay healthy and run its best.
You got that right. It's all about being proactive and taking good care of our cars.
Mm.
Well, this has been a really informative deep dive into the world of synthetic oil. We've busted some myths, learned the science behind it, and figured out how to make the switch safely.
It's been great talking about this with you. Knowing more about your car always helps.
Absolutely. And hopefully our listeners are feeling more confident about choosing the right oil for their cars. So until next time, keep those engines running smooth.